When most Westerners think of the Chinese people, they see a monolithic, homogeneous populace, 1.4 billion people, only one face. The real extent of Chinese heterogeneity is overwhelming. There are 56 ethnic groups recognized by the Chinese government today. This is the story of an unrecognized one, the Kaifang Jews. Jews established their first community in China during the Northern Song, in the capital Kaifang. At that time, Kaifang was a bustling trading hub, an appealing proposition to Jewish merchants, and a religious community soon followed them. Treated as an untrustworthy people by the Yuan, the Jews of Kaifang had their so-called golden age during the reign of the Ming. Their synagogue was expanded several times, government did not intrude on their religious customs, and the Kaifang community thrived economically. It was during this prosperous age that the Jews first underwent extensive sinification. In 1423, a physician named An was the first Jew to receive an official Chinese full name, Jiaoqian. Soon after this, Jews in Kaifang began to abandon their Hebrew names in favor of Chinese ones. By 1489, the Kaifang community matched their neighbors in dress, language, and daily life. Only their religious practices remained to distinguish them from Gentiles. Even that aspect was not as distinct as it might have been. The Jews of Kaifang adopted the Chinese practice of ancestor worship, a ritual with little antecedent in Jewish tradition. They melded the teachings of Confucius and traditional Judaism, believing that both philosophies offered the way to heaven. Soon enough, the 4,000 Jews of Kaifang were like any average Han, save for some lingering Jewish rituals. This vigorously autonomous group was almost completely absorbed into the greater Chinese community by the process of sinification. The key to this development was tolerance. Kaifang citizens accepted their Jewish neighbors as equals, virtually indistinct from themselves. They allowed Jews to both maintain their religion and become acculturated with Ming society. In return, the Kaifang Jews did what so many Chinese had wanted from various neighboring peoples. They became Han. From its beginnings almost 1,000 years ago, the Jews of Kaifang have been small in number and influence. Now some 50 Jews remain, their once proud synagogue maintained mostly for the occasional curious tourist. But their history provides a fascinating perspective into where, how, and why sinification takes effect. Various dynasties have desperately tried to assimilate myriad cultures with decidedly mixed results. Yet in a situation in which the Chinese authorities made little attempt to sinify a populace, these foreigners became completely Chinese in almost every way. Simple acceptance and societal integration of the Kaifang Jews was all it took for the community to abandon their previous ways of life and essentially become Han. Yes, the Jews of Kaifang were small in number, but that did not make their eventual sinification assured. One has only to look at the emphatically independent pre-war Jews of Poland and Russia to know how little Jews assimilate when treated as the other. But because the Ming never thought to hate and fear them, today in the streets of Kaifang, the descendants of Jews and the descendants of ethnic Han walk side by side, indistinguishable. It begs the question, if China had treated the people of their nomadic frontier as equals instead of barbarians, would those 56 ethnic groups have dwindled, one by one, until only the Han remained?
Chang Lang, Qin Qin and Nina Wang, 3 Chinese Jewish women living in Israel, were waiting in the arrivals hall of Ben Gurion International Airport for 7 of their friends who were making Aliyah from China. Chang Lang went through the same experience 3.5 years ago.
I feel that I had a wonderful time. Each step after the 3.5 years, I get used to this land and get to this society, and I feel so good.
Can you tell me about your feeling now?
Oh, I'm so excited now. Also even a little bit nervous.
Actually, it's like a part of our family, but actually we don't have relatives. But still, we were studying together in Kaifang, and we came 4 years ago, and nowadays they are coming, so it's welcome back home.
The 7 young men were warmly welcomed by their friends. They all share the same origins. They are all the descendants of the Jewish community of Kaifang in China, which existed for 1,000 years, dating back to the 8th or 9th century.
But then a process of assimilation and intermarriage began, and essentially in the 19th century the community ceased to exist as a collective entity. The remnants of that community made great efforts to try and preserve their Jewish consciousness and Jewish identity. They passed that down from generation to generation, and in recent years, more and more young people among the descendants in Kaifang are looking to reconnect with their Jewish roots.
When did you find out about your Jewish background?
Many years ago, about 10 years, because my grandpa always my grandpa knows he's a Jew, and he do something about Jews. So when I was little, I know I was a Jew.
Very exciting, very happy, because we'll go home.
The Shavei Yisrael organization has been guiding and supporting these descendants of Kaifang's Jewish community for a couple of years now. Shavei Yisrael's chairman, Michael Freund, has invested huge efforts in making the dreams of the Chinese youngsters come true.
We were struggling against the bureaucracy here for a couple of years to get the necessary permission. Thank God we finally did so earlier this year, and I'm very moved to see these young people back home here in the land of Israel.
How long will you be staying here, and what will you be doing in Israel?
Now we are going to study Hebrew and Jewish culture, and maybe to be a Jew. In the beginning, we plan to study 1 year, but I think not enough.
The next historical moment was the arrival of the new immigrants at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. They came there directly from the airport after waiting many years for their dreams to come true and to give thanks to God and to pray. The next stage will be living on a religious kibbutz in the north and to study Hebrew and Judaism as part of the conversion process.
Time now for Focus. Now, Jewish people around the world may be celebrating Sukkot, but not in one city in eastern China. There, the local authorities have banned Jewish prayer gatherings. It's all part of a wider effort to weaken religious affiliation, but it means one of the first Jewish communities in China is disappearing. Our team went to find out more.
They came through that door, China's first Jews. Merchants travelling by the Silk Road who settled in Kaifang 10 centuries ago. An ancient story that Guo Yin, a guide who is Jewish, introduced to tourists. She knows the history of the oldest Jewish community in China off by heart. But in recent months, she has had nothing to show to visitors. The Chinese authorities have made a clean sweep of the past.
So not only here, and also here we put some David stars on the door, but now they cut it. And also we have a David star here, and they take it. And also there have a tablet to write that here is a study room, a Jewish study. But they also call me, they ask me to take it out. If I don't take it, they will take it. And I didn't come back to take it, and so they take it.
A little further on, the local government has even removed the tablet that proved the existence of the former synagogue, which fell into ruins in the 19th century.
In 2008, the local government want to rebuild the synagogue as a museum. So they put a tablet here to say here is the site of the synagogue. But now they move the tablet. Yeah.
In China, only 5 religions are officially recognized by the state. Judaism is not one of them. Its practice is merely tolerated, but recently the Kaifang Jews have been forced to practice their religion in secret. The local government banned them from meeting. In the community, no one wanted to answer our questions. Only this one woman agreed to receive us on condition of anonymity. She fears reprisals from the authorities.
Here's a picture taken from the time when we'd still celebrate Shabbat together. But today it's rare that we meet. We do it all alone at home.
In the closed-down premises where we had our meeting, there are memories from the time when the Jewish community was able to speak freely. Since the change in policy dictated by central government, some have decided to leave the country.
There are people in Kaifang who left to go to the United States, but not that many. Most of them have left for Israel. There are about 10 who've already left. Young people who want to go there to learn about our religion.
Among those who went was Barnaby Yi, a Taiwanese and US citizen who was the representative in Kaifang of a Center for Chinese and Jewish Studies. Just a few months ago, the authorities closed the institution and he was forced to leave. We talked to Barnaby Yi in the United States, where he now lives. He denounced the policies of President Xi Jinping, who thinks religious organizations with global networks are a threat to China's way of life, as they give foreigners the opportunity to interfere in Chinese society.
It's paranoia of foreigners. Religion has something to do with it because religion is also a vehicle for a potential uprising. That's also what they're scared of. They have just been told, don't be so public. Because this is, of course, this is a part of a wider, I want to say crackdown, a wider tightening on religion in general.
In Kaifang, we meet Guo Yan again. To prevent the Jewish heritage of the city completely disappearing, the young woman has turned a small apartment into a museum. In just 15 square meters are all the memories of the Jewish community. Today, in addition to the pressure from authorities, she regrets the departure of the younger Jewish generation of Kaifang.
The Israel organization, they're helping the young generations goes back. And then more and more young generations goes back. If all of ours goes back, maybe this will be disappeared. So we also worry about that. And also what I'm worried about is not only the Kaifang Jews, but also the Chinese Jewish culture.
On the floor of her apartment, Guo Yan wants to show us one last thing.
So this is a model of the synagogue.
A replica built by her father of the former synagogue of Kaifang. Inside the ark, she has carefully preserved a Hebrew Torah that was gifted to her by Jews from Israel. A way for her to continue practicing her religion in front of this homemade shrine.
Can you tell us in Chinese how you say, I'm happy to be in Israel?
我很开心来到以色列。
I didn't understand, but that seemed to come out of the heart. Welcome home.
Yeah, thank you.
Shalom, here at Arutz Sheva, we of course always like to greet new immigrants coming to Israel. Today, a special group, 5 girls from China who are Jewish descendants. They came here to Israel, and this is all part of the activity of the Shavei Israel organization. When did you discover that you were Jewish?
When I was young, maybe 7 or 8.
My father and grandfather told me, we are Jew. We need to come back to come back to Israel.
What can you tell us about the feeling when the plane landed?
Wow, I can't tell. It's so exciting. I wasn't able to sleep yesterday. Yeah.
What was the feeling when the flight came landed?
Exciting.
Feel excited. Feel 神奇咋说 magic. Yeah.
Like magic.
Yeah.
B'ezrat Hashem.
B'ezrat Hashem. With God's help. Have a good luck.
Toda.
What we're seeing here today is Jewish history in the making. The return of 5 young Chinese Jews on Aliyah to Israel. There was a Jewish community in Kaifang in China since at least the 7th or the 8th century. About 150, 200 years ago, a process of assimilation and intermarriage set in. But until today, there are about 1,000 people in Kaifang who are identifiable as descendants of the Jewish community via family trees. And in recent years, a growing number of the young people have been looking to return to their Jewish roots.
Descendants of Jews coming from where? Is this also what we define as the lost tribes, or is this something else?
No, they are descendants of Sephardic Jews from Iraq or Persia who traveled along the Silk Route and settled in the city of Kaifang, which at the time was one of the imperial capitals of China.
Now, in terms of what you're talking about, assimilation, these Jews, the descendants of Jews, they need to go through processes at this stage, right?
That's correct. They'll be studying here at a religious women's seminary, preparing to undergo formal conversion by Israel's chief rabbinate.
We need to learn many knowledge about the Holy Bible, Tanakh, Tushba, and we need to do our best.
How was the feeling this morning? I mean, you're used to all these landings. Well, what is it, exciting every time?
It's emotional every time because each person is a world unto themselves, and we've been struggling for the past 3 or 4 years to get the requisite permission in order to bring these young women here. I spent a lot of time nudging and cajoling and lobbying bureaucrats and Knesset members and ministers. But thank God, finally, the permission came and they've come home. And I want to mention there's a verse in the book of Isaiah, chapter 49, verse 12, where God speaks about the return, the ingathering of the exiles. And at the end of the verse it says, Ve'ele me'eretz sinim. These from the land of the Sinim. Sinim, of course, is Hebrew for Chinese. So I'd like to believe that what we're seeing today is the fulfillment of that prophetic vision. In Hebrew, the word for Jew is Yehudi. It has many meanings, many roots, but one of the roots is lehodot, to say thank you, to show gratitude. That is a critical component of being a Jew, is to show gratitude to God and to your fellow man. So at this special moment, when you have finally arrived here back in the land of your ancestors, the first thing that we need to do is to say thank you to the Creator of the world. By coming here, you are about to fulfill the mitzvah. You are about to fulfill the commandment of settling the land of Israel, which is one of the most precious mitzvot that we have. And because it is your first time coming here to live here, let's say the bracha of Shehechianu together. Shehechianu is the bracha that we say on a special occasion when we are particularly happy about something. And there's no more appropriate moment to say it than when a Jew comes home to Israel. So let's say it together with me. Baruch,
Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shehechianu V'kiyamanu
Lazman
Hazeh.
Amen. We also have to thank the State of Israel. The fact that we have Jewish sovereignty again in the land of Israel is itself a miracle, and it is that sovereignty here that allows so many Jews, such as yourselves, to come back from the four corners of the earth. I know that you know Hatikva in Chinese because I've heard you sing it. I can't sing it with you, but if you wouldn't mind singing it now, it would mean a lot to us.
只要心灵深处尚存犹太人的希望，凝望饥荒的眼睛，注视着西安山上，我们还没有死去2000年的希。
Judaism, one of the three main monotheistic religions of the world, is also one of the oldest faiths. The Jewish community has existed and still exists in many countries of the world, and even in the Far East. The origin of Jewish people in China is very hard to trace. Alfred Edersheim reports in his book, The History of the Jewish Nation, published in 1856, that an inscription in the old Jewish temple of the town of Kaifang states that the Jewish religion entered China during the Han Dynasty. However, if that were indeed the case, the isolated practitioners were unable to establish a perennial community. The first reliable evidence of Jewish people in China dates from the Tang dynasty, where emperors largely tolerated practically any religious practices. A business letter written on Chinese paper, identified as dating from 718 CE, was found in a post along the Silk Road. It was composed in a Judeo-Persian language. In his report, Ibn Zayd al-Hassan of Siraf, a 9th century Arab adventurer, describes the massacre of Canton by Huang Chao in 878, where according to him many foreign merchants, including Jews, were killed. At the time, the Chinese society had little knowledge of Western religions and considered all Abrahamic religions to be different sects of the same religion. They often mistook Jews for Muslims. It was also in the 9th century that a strong Jewish community was established in China. Kaifang, a prosperous town at the Chinese end of the Silk Road, became a place of rest for merchants. Many foreigners, especially Arabs and Persians, settled there. Some were Jewish, initiating a long lineage that still exists today. In 1163, the town was still thriving, having become the capital city of the Song dynasty. The Jewish community founded their first synagogue, of which no trace still exists today. They gradually assimilated with local ethnic Chinese. Many explorers from the West noted the presence of Jewish communities in China, such as Marco Polo in the late 13th century, John of Montecorvino, later to become the first Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Beijing in the late 14th century, and Ibn Battuta, a Muslim scholar and world explorer in the middle of the 14th century. During his conquest, Genghis Khan forbade for Muslims and Jews that he considered to be more or less the same people from practicing many of their rituals, especially regarding food. This law would still be applied after his death, when his son Ogedai Khan captured Kaifeng in 1233, one of the last steps of defeating the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty. The overthrow of the Mongol rule by former peasant Zhu Yuanzhang, soon to become the first emperor of the Ming dynasty, took place in 1368. An emperor of the Ming dynasty declared that Jewish people would be conferred 8 family names, as was done to all communities. 2 of them, Shi and Jin, meaning stone and gold, are probably linked with their Western counterparts Stein and gold. Matteo Ricci, perhaps the most influential Christian missionary to China, reported on the Jewish community. While in Beijing in 1605, a Chinese Jew from Kaifeng, who had come to the capital to take the imperial examination, a necessary test for aspiring civil servants, approached him. He introduced himself as Ngai, though his Chinese name was probably Ai Tian, and he was about 60 years old. He had come to Ricci because while reading about Christianity, he had found that they worshipped the same God. He told the missionary that about 10 families in Kaifeng practiced Judaism. There were also other Jewish communities in other cities like Hangzhou. Ricci, being a Christian missionary, hoped to convert the Chinese Jews and later dispatched another missionary to Kaifeng to investigate. The man reported that Jewish texts did indeed exist in the Kaifeng synagogue. A few years later, 3 other Kaifeng Jews, including Ai Tian's nephew, went to Ricci in Beijing to be baptized. They informed him that the old rabbi had died and that his son who had replaced him was quite unlearned in matters pertaining to his faith. Ricci said the Chinese Jews would probably become extinct. He was partially right, as the Chinese Jewish community besides Kaifeng was indeed declining. A few years later, another Jesuit priest missionary named Álvaro Semedo, who had arrived in Nanjing from Portugal in 1613, was told there by Muslim merchants that the last 4 Jewish families in Nanjing had converted to Islam. 3 years later, in 1616, Zhao Yingchang, a Chinese Jew, was born in Kaifeng. He grew up speaking both Chinese and Hebrew, and at 27 years old, he obtained the Jinshi degree at the imperial examinations, ranking first. He became an official, being appointed director of the Ministry of Justice. In 1642, Kaifeng was voluntarily flooded by the Ming Dynasty army in an attempt to stop Li Zicheng, the dashing king, a rebel leader who would later overthrow the Ming and establish his own short-lived Shun dynasty that lasted for a year. As a result, the town was destroyed and the Jews emigrated north, taking with them any sacred text they could save. Most of them were strongly damaged and became illegible. About 10 years after these events, Zhao Yingchang was determined to restore the city, with the help of his brother, Zhao Yingdou, and other Chinese Jews. They incited the Kaifeng Jews to come back to the city, and largely financed the reconstruction of the synagogue, rebuilt in 1663. Some of the sacred scrolls were deciphered and copied on new paper, with the expertise of Zhao and other scholars proficient in Hebrew and with a good knowledge of Jewish texts. The Kaifang Jewish community started to decline irrevocably during the Qing dynasty, during the 19th century. In 1810, the last rabbi died without an heir, as knowledge of Hebrew had not been passed on. In 1853, the synagogue fell in ruins and was completely destroyed by a flood in 1866. Thanks to the work of several French priests who sketched it, we still know what it looked like. A year after, the first modern Western Jews to visit Kaifang, Aaron Halevi Fink and J.L. Lieberman, a Viennese merchant, reported that the Chinese Jews in Kaifang still had their own cemetery and kept on some practices. In the early 20th century, Shanghai became a strong area of Western influence. Please don't hesitate to go and watch my video on that subject, links in the description. Many Jewish traders settled there and developed businesses. Most of them were German and Russian, but French, Austrian and Italian Jews also arrived to Shanghai and other concessions such as Tianjin. With the repression of Jewish people in Europe during the Second World War, many moved away and came to China, as the country did not impose visas on them. In 1940, there were about 36,000 Jewish people in China. The Jewish diaspora settled in two main areas, Shanghai and Hong Kong if they came from Europe or the Middle East, and Harbin if they came from Russia. Sun Yat-sen, founder of the Chinese Republic, held strong admiration for the Jewish people, often comparing their struggles with China's against Western powers. It is estimated that in the 100 years between 1845, date around which the Western powers started colonizing China, and 1945, end of the Japanese invasion, more than 40,000 Jewish people went to China for work and security. After World War II, most of them returned to the West or went to Israel. Today, synagogues still exist in Shanghai, where about 2,000 to 3,000 Jewish people remain, and Hong Kong, with about 5,000 Jewish people. There are also about 1,500 to 2,000 Jewish people in Beijing today. Concerning Taiwan, about 300 Jewish people live on the island. Rabbi Ephraim Einhorn, its only rabbi, arrived there in 1975. As for Kaifang, a census estimated the Jewish population to be about 500 people, out of which 40 to 50 people still practice their religion today.
עכשיו סיפור על עיר קטנה מצפון לבייג'ין, ששם מתברר חיים צאצאים למשפחות יהודיות. רק לפני כמה שנים הם גילו את השורשים שלהם, ומאז הם חולמים לעשות עלייה לארץ, הם חוזרים בתשובה, ולפני שבוע וחצי הגיעה סנונית ראשונה, כמה מהם עלו לארץ. כתבנו בצפון אלירן טל מביא את הסיפור, הנה.
בפעם הראשונה שראו אותם, חשבו ותיקי שדה אליהו שעובדים זרים הגיעו לקיבוץ. אבל אז הם ראו שהצעירים הסינים חובשים כיפה ולובשים ציציות, וגילו שהם בכלל עולים חדשים. כן, מסין.
אנחנו יהודים, רוצים ללמוד עברית והיסטוריה על ישראל.
סבתא, סבא שלי וגם הורים שלי אמרו לי, סיפרו לי שאת יהודייה, אם יום אחד יכול להיות את חייבת לחזור לארץ.
במשך מאות שנים התקיימה בעיר קייפנג קהילה יהודית משגשגת שמקורה בפרס ובעיראק. חיים טובים היו להם שם, בלי אנטישמיות ובלי רדיפות. למעשה היהודים השתלבו כל כך יפה בסין עד שהתבוללו ונטמעו כמעט לחלוטין בחברה המקומית. אבל לפני כמה שנים אחת המשפחות בקהילה גילתה את השורשים, ומאז 1,000 היהודים שנותרו בסין עוברים תהליך מדהים ומיוחד של חזרה ליהדות.
Community will also celebrate Shabbat, will also celebrate the festival of Israel, like Pesach, Hanukkah. We also get together to celebrate it.
האינטרנט משחק כאן תפקיד מרכזי בכל התהליך הזה, כי פתאום נפתח בפניהם עולם חדש של מידע, של גישה לאינפורמציה, גם על היהדות וגם על מדינת ישראל.
משרד הפנים העמיד קשיים ובתחילה סירב לאפשר את עלייתם של הצאצאים לישראל. רק אחרי הליך בירוקרטי ארוך ומתיש, הורשתה הקבוצה הקטנה הזאת לעלות לארץ.
הם אינם זכאי חוק השבות, כך שכל המימון בא מאיתנו, מהארגון.
סל קליטה הם מקבלים?
כרגע לא.
רגע אחרי שנחתו בארץ, ביקשו הצעירים מסין לעלות למקום הקדוש ליהודים, הכותל המערבי, ולהתפלל על שהגשימו את חלום העלייה לישראל. הצעירים כבר משתלבים בקיבוץ. חצי מהשבוע מוקדש ללימודי עברית ויהדות, החצי השני עבודה במשק. עכשיו הם רק מייחלים לרגע שבו מדינת ישראל תאפשר גם למשפחות שלהם לעשות עלייה ולהתגייר.
ישראל סבבה, מדינה הכי יפה בכל העולם.
את שמחה שבאת?
כן, בטח, אני מאוד שמחה לבוא לארץ.
We hope we can stay here, we can live here, we can live Israel forever.
About 4 months ago, a group of Chinese Jews from Kaifang arrived to live in Israel under the initiative of the Shavei Israel organization. They came to the Hebrew Ulpan of Kibbutz Steliyahu in the Bet Shan Valley to learn Hebrew and Judaism. In addition, they also work in all branches of the kibbutz life.
עכשיו אנחנו לומדים עברית ועובדים. יום אחד לומדים, יום אחד עובדים.
זה חיים פה טוב מאוד. זה אוויר פה חדש. אני חושב זה עץ שלי.
The youngsters are the descendants of the oldest Jews from China's Kaifang community, which was most likely established in the 8th to 9th century. The synagogue in Kaifang was built in the 11th century, destroyed many times, then renovated again. The last rabbi of the Kaifang community died in the early 1800s. It looked as if the Jewish community in Kaifang had been wiped out. But in the last years, there's been an awakening among the youngest members of the community. They started to research their identity and Jewish roots, despite the difficulties posed by the communist regime. The Shavei Israel organization helped escort the Jews throughout the process and brought a few families to Israel, who managed to be absorbed successfully. A number of young women came to Kibbutz Steliyahu and also integrated well into other places in Israel. One of them even married a young American Jew in Jerusalem in a moving and special wedding.
But we know we are Jewish. From generation to generation, they tell the next generation, you are Jewish. You must remember you are Jewish.
את תמיד ידעת שאת יהודייה?
כן, תמיד ידעתי. מגיל קטן כל זמן אבא שלי אומר שאנחנו צאצאים יהודים.
And they expressed a very strong desire to return to the Jewish people and to the land of their ancestors, the land of Israel. We brought them to this country to enable them to fulfill that dream.
Do you feel they have a strong Jewish identity?
Ah, yes, definitely. The seeds are there, definitely, and we've just got to help them flower.
With their special grace and gentle manner, the young people from Kaifang have managed to conquer the hearts of the kibbutznikim of Steliyahu.
היינו מעוניינים שיבואו פה עוד בחורים ובחורות מהקהילה בסין. מאוד נחמדים, מאוד נעים לעבוד איתם, מרגישים שהם רציניים, גם בעבודה, גם בנימוסים כלפינו וגם בניסיון להצטרף לעם ישראל בכלל.
Hardly any problems with them. They work well, they study well in class, they're learning Hebrew well. Quite a dream, really.
In light of this success, the Shavei Israel organization decided to bring more young Jews to Israel from Kaifang.
We want to ensure that the young men have a successful and speedy absorption here into Israeli society. And for that purpose, we are investing a great deal of efforts and resources to enable them to learn Hebrew. We want them to feel at home here. We want them to become an integral part of Israeli society here in the Jewish state.
And on a lighter note, how does it feel to be both Chinese and Jewish? Our Israeli team talks to a young woman from Kaifang, China, who belongs to both of these ancient cultures. Here's her story.
We caught up with Jinjin and her father, Mr. Jing, at the airport. He spent the holidays with her here in Israel. and now he's returning to China.
When I was a little child, my father always told me, "You are Jewish. You should go back to Israel." So I said, "Okay, I'm a Jewish. I should go back to Israel."
Jinjin has been living in Israel for the past 2 years and learned to speak Hebrew. She can now translate Jewish scriptures into Chinese to help the Jewish community in Kaifang.
In Israel, it's according to mother, but in China, it's according to father. So since my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather is Jewish, so my father are Jewish and I'm Jewish.
Like all religious Jews, Mr. Jing wears a tzitzit under his shirt and a kippah on his head. He shows us his kippah and explains.
Here it says Kaifang in Hebrew, and here it says Kaifang in English. It's handmade.
So how is it possible that Jinjin's ancestors were Jewish? We went to see Michael Freund to find out. He specializes in locating descendants of Jews around the world and helps them return to Israel.
There was a Jewish community in Kaifang for over 1,000 years. Jews first arrived there around the 8th or the 9th century along the Silk Route. They settled in Kaifang, which at the time was one of the imperial capitals of China. And over the centuries, a Jewish community in every respect took root there.
Back at the airport, it's time to say goodbye.
I think my father is right. There is the land that God promised to us. Yes, that's our home.
NTD, Ben Gurion Airport, Israel.
Es ist kaum zu glauben. Ein Chinese legt Felin die jüdischen Gebetsriemen an. Warum tut er das? Xu Yuguang und 6 andere junge Chinesen sind nach Israel gekommen, um hier die Traditionen ihrer Vorfahren wiederzubeleben, das Judentum. Aber davon haben sie nur eine sehr vage Vorstellung. Wir sind sehr bewegt, hier zu sein. Wir wollen wahre Juden werden und Teil des jüdischen Volks. Über ihre jüdischen Wurzeln wissen die Chinesen nur aus Büchern. Sie kommen aus Kaifeng, eine Stadt mit einer uralten jüdischen Geschichte. Die Nachkommen jüdischer Händler, die einst über die Seidenstraße kamen, lebten in China assimiliert, ohne Glauben. Weite Teile ihrer Traditionen sind verloren gegangen. In einem israelischen Kibbutz arbeiten und lernen sie, diese wiederzufinden. Nur wenige Rituale hatten sich noch erhalten. Meine Familie hat den Schabbat erhalten und wir haben koscher gegessen, sagt Xu. Um offiziell als Jude anerkannt zu werden, muss man entweder eine jüdische Mutter haben oder konvertieren. Ein langer Prozess. Hebräisch, jüdische Geschichte, Traditionen sind Voraussetzung, um die Prüfung vor dem Rabbinat zu bestehen. Ein Religionslehrer bringt ihnen die Grundlagen bei. Wir, das jüdische Volk, haben eine historische Verantwortung, eine moralische Verantwortung, ja sogar eine religiöse Verantwortung, unsere Brüder zu unterstützen, nach Hause zurückzukehren. Für die 7 Chinesen wird es ein langer Weg, ein wahrer Jude zu werden. Aber die echte Herausforderung wird sein, sich in der israelischen Gesellschaft zu behaupten.
Geschichte sind berühmt und beliebt schon jahrelang. Aber lassen wir noch einmal bewundern die jüdischen Pioniere von China und dabei erzählen etwas wegen dem Aufleben des Aschires von Goles, aber besonders Modne Maislav Pesach. Mumchim glauben, dass mit den Erich 1000 Jahren zurück haben reingewandert daher eine Gruppe von persischen Jiden, meistens Seuchrim. Bis demalt haben die Jiden keinmal nicht gewohnt in einem missrechtigen Ort. Aber die Macht, der Misscher und der Raffiniertheit von dem so gerufenen mitteldicken Königreich haben sie stark zugezogen. Die erste Simonim von dem jüdischen Beisein in China hat man gefunden auf dem Sami Mairev, in Xinjiang und Dunhuang, auf dem Seidenen Weg, in Briefen und Dokumenten geschrieben auf Judäo-Persisch. Dachte sich, Als jüdische Seuchrim, Lepoches Männer, haben sich besetzt euch in Hangzhou und öfter in andere chinesische Städte.
我们祖祖辈辈传的我们是犹太人，所有来的游客也都说啊，你们是开封犹太人，我们就一直觉得我们是犹太人。直到我表妹，我们才知道啊，以色列那边并不认为我们是犹太人。他有回归法嘛，他有首先来说他要认母系，但是我们是父系，他要认这个犹太教，但是呢，我们是150多年前就已经没有我们最后一个拉比都没有了，我们的经书也没有了，而且我说了，应该在1000多年前，将近2、3千年前，2000多年前，应该我们的语言就掌握的不是很好了。根据目前我所知道的，我所认识的所有的就是开封犹太人的现状，就其他人的现状，那么他们觉得呢，最好的就是回到自己的祖国去，就像我以前一样，就很简单的想法，我就是想回到我的祖国去。他们愿意回到以色列去。
Die größte jüdische Bevölkerung ist gewesen in der Stadt, Kaifang, wo wir befinden sich jetzt. Beismeise ist Kaifang gewesen die Hauptstadt von Chinas Song-Dynastie und einer von den größten und reichsten Centers in der Welt. Später ist der Titel Hauptstadt weg zu anderen Städten. Lange Jahre ist Kaifang gewesen auf Zores und wie sagt man, mehr nicht in die Federn. Wir befinden sich jetzt in einer Sklad von einem Spital, nicht weit von den berühmten Wassern von einem gelben Teich, voll mit Samen von Gobi Midbar. Tut a Guck auf dem nebendicken Ort, als was ist heint geblieben von der Beis Medrash, aufgebaut laut die Dokumenten, um 1163. Was ist heint Kaifang? Auf dem Hintergrund von der chinesischen Entwicklung in allen Gebieten bleibt die Stadt verlost und nichtig. A viele die Geschichte ist übergerissen geworden. Die alte Binyonim und prächtige Geslach zerstört von der Zeit und euch von den Menschen. Die amalige Schreinim von Jiden, hereingerechnet nicht wenig chinesische Muselmänner, haben die jüdische Religion angerufen Tiao Jinjiao, die was warfen heraus die Spanodern, ein Ondeit auf Kaschres. Kiemat 700 Jahre ist die Gehille geblieben tätig. In ihr Höchpunkt ist sie bestanden von herum 4000 Jiden. Eider sie haben sich vermindert durch Assimilation und gemischte Chassanas. A Chaverte meine, chinesische, hat einmal geschrieben eine Forscharbeit wegen dem, als die Kaifang-Jiden seinen Tage matzlich gewesen, ausgehalten die Examens auf Hereintreten in dem chinesischen Zivildienst und der Fahr haben sie natürlich angenommen dem Weltbanem und dem Minhagim von der konfuzianistischen Kultur. Beim Besuch in die Stadt Malacca in Malaysia haben mir der Mond, wie der Missionär Francis Xavier hat gehört Ideen wegen die chinesischen Jiden. Und nachdem, wie der Jesuit Matteo Ricci hat sich getroffen mit der Jid von Kaifang in Pekin anheb 17. Jahrhundert. Von dem an sind die chinesischen Jiden nicht wissendig allein bekannt geworden in Europa. Von wann Schreibers und Denkers haben sie geschickt Brief, gemacht Vergleichen und polemisiert wegen seiner Abstammung. Ein gesederdick Strom von Europäern zwischen sie euch Meirev-Jiden und bagdadische Jiden haben angehoben zuvor nachher im mitten 19. Jahrhundert, wenn die Gehille ist schon kiemat verschwunden geworden. Der letzte Siemen nach der Petere ist geblieben das einzige Gessel, wo wir reden jetzt, was heißt bis heint die Geske von Lernen Teure auf Chinesisch. Die Besuchers pflegen kaufen da gewisse Scherissen wie Sefer Teures, was befinden sich jetzt in der britischen Bibliothek, in Dallas, in Kanada und andere Orte. Sidurim, Chumushim und Pinkesim in Hebrew Union College und so weiter. Etliche Mischpuche sind geblieben auf dem Ort und haben sich Stillerheit identifiziert wie Jiden, jetzt nur die Mischpuche Zhao. Und was ist der heutige Matzev? Im 19. und 20. Jahrhundert ist die goldene Kette von Tradition in Kaifang abgeschnitten geworden. Kein klare Sporen und ein Hemmschicht davon sind kiemat nicht da und wenig Ideen sind ergangen bis die Zeiten von Chinas Reform und Offenheit. Das Ureinikel von dem letzten Rav ist nifter geworden mit ein paar Jahren zurück. Aber letztens, Alpines, ist geschehen etwas kompliziert und ungerecht. Ein neues Interesse zur Jüdischkeit zwischen den übergebliebenen Mischpuches. Ein Tage, eine Auflebung. Dazu darf man nehmen in Betracht die Meiles für eine Minderheit in China. Trotz die Jiden von Kaifang sind noch nicht keine offizielle Gruppe.
Tourism ist euch ein positiver Faktor und die Rabbonim, Touristen und Stamm-Jiden, nicht so viel, aber als mehr und mehr, kommen zu Hilfe die ortige Jiden. Jetzt sind da hunderte Menschen, was halten sich für Jiden und zähnliche, was sind ein bisschen tätig in der Kehille, oder besser gesagt in die kleinen Gruppelech, a viele davenen Shabbos, öffnen geheime Ausstellungen und Schulen. Aber zum Bedeuern sind die Jiden von Kaifang stark zerteilt in Fraktions, zu lieb das Ampernisch von verschiedenen Persönlichkeiten. Die Ressourcen zu gehen weiter, sei menschliche, sei materielle, sind nicht da.
其实来说还是会很受关注的，就像这次上海开世博会嘛，都会有这个安全局的人来到我家，他就会问我，那个上海开世博会了，你有没有什么打算呢？我说我有什么打算呢？说你要不要到上海去看看那个犹太人呢？我要去不要去？我有什么理由要跟你汇报呢？所以我就觉得，你看他肯定不会说问我的邻居。不会那样的，所以我们还是比较敏感的一个问题吧。所以你再来一些外国人的这是一方面的问题。再一个我就说了，最早的时候我们因为要学希伯来语啊，学习很多东西啊，也会有很多外国人来了之后，犹太教本身也有很多不同的支派。其次来说，各个拉比之间也都不是说每个拉比都很服气另一个拉比，都觉得他说的是实话。我觉得犹太人有一个有一句俗语吧，说2个犹太人有3种意见，拉比之间也是彼此总是争吵，他就觉得他教的不对，他觉得他教的不对，然后我们是这样学的时候，他说，哎，那个拉比教的不对，你应该这样，然后有的人呢就觉得，哎，你教的这个对，就有的开文上就跟从了这个，有的开文上就跟从了那个。
Nu, sollen andere sein in Sofik wegen sehr Obstammen, sie sie meinen Jüdischkeit auf ein Emes, sie nicht. Mit ein paar Jahren zurück sind etlich von sie a viele Eule gewesen, kein Israel. In Kaifang gefindt man nicht kein wunderliche Denkmäler und Museen, lekov die ortige Jiden. Und die klare Simonim von Jüdischkeit sind nicht kein alte, chutz a paar lomdische Überbleiben. Es macht nicht aus. Jedes Jahr pravet man Pesach mit a Seder in ein ortigen musulmänischen Restaurant, weil das ist nennt zu Kashrus. Und doch genug mit der Geschichte. Lassen wir sich freuen, als wir haben Brüder und Schwestern in asa verworfenen Ort. Als jüdische Tfiles und Gesangen klingen noch einmal in a weiter dicken Eck von China.
Shave Israel auttaa muitakin juutalaisryhmiä tiedostamaan uskonnollisen identiteettinsä ja muuttamaan Israeliin. Kaifengissä Itä-Kiinassa elää noin 1000 juutalaista. He ovat vasta viime vuosina alkaneet palata uskonnollisille ja kansallisille juurilleen. 2 vuotta sitten Kaifengista muutti Israeliin 10 nuoren ryhmä. He opiskelevat juutalaisuutta Jerusalemista etelään sijaitsevassa Gus Etzionissa.
Most people are not aware of the fact that there was a Chinese Jewish community for over 1,000 years. The first Jews are believed to have arrived in China around the 8th or the 9th century. They were Jewish traders traveling along the Silk Route. They originated in either Persia or Iraq, and they reached Kaifang, where, the legend goes, the Chinese emperor greeted them and gave them their blessing to settle in the city, which is what they did. Slowly but surely, a Jewish community blossomed there, and in the Middle Ages, there were as many as 4,000 to 5,000 Jews living in Kaifang with rabbis and synagogues and community institutions. Around the 18th century or so, a process of assimilation and intermarriage began to take place there among the Jewish community. They faced almost no anti-Semitism whatsoever, so it was very easy for them to begin to integrate and then melt away into the larger society. Nonetheless, until today, there are about 1,000 people in Kaifang who look Chinese, who speak Chinese, but who are identifiable as descendants of the Kaifang Jewish community. Communism in China nearly succeeded in erasing that identity. But we know that no man-made power is stronger than faith. And the Jewish descendants of Kaifang always kept a strong connection with their ancestors and with their identity. And in recent years, as Chinese society has opened up more, and as the internet has made information about Israel and Jews more accessible to the people in Kaifang, there has been an awakening taking place there, particularly among the younger generation who want to learn more about Israel, who want to reconnect with their Jewish roots. And over the past few years, we've been blessed to be able to bring groups of these young people, of young Kaifang Jews from China, on Aliyah to Israel, where they undergo a process of return to the Jewish people, and then they become Israeli citizens in every respect. We have the beginnings of a Chinese Jewish community developing right here in Jerusalem.
First, I learned in university for chemistry 1 year. Then I heard the Show Israel. They came and helped us to had a community. So we began to find back our ancient religion. Because before we only knew we were Jewish descendants. So, but what's the meaning for us? Is not only we don't eat pork or we don't eat blood. It's many meaning, but we didn't know in that time. So we just try to get together, like several times a week, to learn something about history about Israel, history about Jews, or some Hebrew. My feeling is very after I came here is became very calm, yeah, not like in China. Because I think this is because of the people. They are very nice.
Before in China, my job is a dentist. I have worked 3 years in clinic. I studied dentist in college, 4 years. Yeah, after then I come to Israel. I'm very young, 12 before. I don't know about everything Jewish. But my grandpa first time told me, or my mother's family is from Jewish religion. It's a little simulation right now, because Kaifang right now we lost the tradition long time ago. So right now why we want to come to here. So I think before in China I learned in China Kaifang Jewish community 3 years. So I learned a little bit basic religion and a little bit Hebrew. Mm-hmm. So right now I understand why we want to come to Israel. So why we are from a Jewish family. Mm-hmm. So what is Jewish? So right now I think we come to here is not I want to become Jewish. Is I'm Jewish. I'm just lost tradition a long time years ago.
Our estimate is that about half of the 1,000 Jewish descendants in Kaifang have, for the most part, assimilated and are no longer interested or connected to their identity. The other half are interested, and of those 400 to 500 people, we estimate that most of them, if given the opportunity, would in fact like to explore Israel as an option. In China, as we know, there is a great deal of reverence and respect for one's ancestors. So the Jewish descendants of Kaifang have always carried that within them, that strong sense of respect for their forefathers. And in a sense, many of them want to live up to the dreams of their ancestors, who always prayed and hoped for the day when they would be allowed to come back here. The prophets all speak about the fact that towards the end of days, Judah will return to the land, as will the people of Israel. For example, The prophet Jeremiah in chapter 3 says, "In those days the house of Judah will walk with the house of Israel." Judah and Israel coming together again here in the land. And I believe that we are actually witnessing the fulfillment of those words before our very eyes.